And you have talked about the fact that in our culture that you see 5 cultural trends that you're saying that are irreversible unless God steps in. And that's a kind of a scary proposition. So we've got a kind of the bad news before we get to the good news, because we have to be realistic about the future that we're going into. What are those 5 irreversible trends?
Well, John, first of all, let me say how pleased I am to be back on your show and to discuss this, because you're exactly right. As I travel around the country, there are so many people who are discouraged. Where is this nation going? And that's why we're going to talk about these kinds of things. And yes, I think that some of these trends are irreversible apart from God's intervention. So as we go through them, let's keep in mind that it may be that God will reverse them. There's always that hope. In fact, we're going to be talking about prayer at some point along the line and God's goodness to this nation. But at the same time, I want to look at this so realistically and say, what do we do if we don't experience such a reversal? And of course, I put on my list number 1, economic decline. I know that the stock market continues to go up and down, and sometimes it's very difficult to know exactly where we are economically. But as you know, I've done some research regarding Nazi Germany, and I discovered this, that when a nation begins to print money to pay its debts, it really can't quit. Because the moment you quit, you throw all kinds of people into unemployment, you reverse everything. So all that you can continue to do is to keep printing. And of course, we hear this on the news all the time, that our economists are telling us that the trend and the continuing trend is not only possibly irreversible, but even more seriously, it is unsustainable. And that has a huge impact for all of us. And one of the reasons I'm concerned about that is because I know that God has used America to bring the gospel to so many people around the world. It supports various ministries throughout the world. And if we were to go through a terrible economic downturn, the implications would not just be for us, but for others. But on the other hand, maybe God wants us to actually join the rest of the world. John, I'm sure that there are people who are listening to this program in other countries who live with a great deal of poverty. Many of them, by the way, are more content than Americans who might have more. And God has to remind us that we are in this world together and that He is going to bring us through whatever difficulties there may be along the path. But yes, I would put the economy first in terms of my concerns and what this would mean for us as individuals, and really the world. How will we relate to that?
Yeah, our friend Dr. David Jeremiah, he came and we talked about his book, The Coming Economic Disaster. And when we taped the program, our country was $14 trillion in debt. A year and a half later, we were $16.5 trillion in debt. We're going towards $17 trillion. In a couple years, we'll reach 20, and the interest will be $1 trillion all by itself. We cannot sustain that, and people are worried about that, and that may be irreversible because it doesn't seem like anybody has an answer up at the Congress.